So when we supposed to use the if statement and when we're supposed to use the switch statement, it's really more like matter of preference as well. So sometimes the difference between the two is not clear, just like for loop or while loop. But let's say, for example, let's say I have const name, for example, something like that. Name is John here, and I have different check here. I want to check this name in many different ways. Now I can use the if block, so if statement here. I can just say if name is John, do something else. Jane, do something else. Again, I can add else like that. Voila. I can do it this way, or I can simply use the same case with switch statement. I can pass the name, and here I can take the case John, Jane, and also with a switch statement, I need to have a default value. The default value is like as the else statement here. So we can now, in this example, we can use both of them like that. Normally, the way I distinguish between them, if I have in my if statement here, if I have a lot of checks here, so not one else if I have multiple else if, and I can implement switch statement, it will be much better because switch statement is more readable comparing to this one. I mean, the difference between the two, again, sometimes it's not clear. I can use either of them, it's fine. But the way I like you to think of it, if I have a lot of else if block like that, so if I have another else if, let's just say else if name is Do, for example, and I have another one, So reading this code, as you can see, it's a bit difficult actually. Reading this code is more easier, and I think it's more clear, it's more readable. Did I answer your question, Manloy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Again, it's not always very clear the difference between them because you can use either, but if you have multiple choice like that, this one is a bit not readable, this one is a little bit more readable. That should be clear. Let's go to loops. I mean, the loops, they should be really simple. They shouldn't be that difficult, but let's go to that. We have for loop. Now to understand.
For Sam, of course, for you it's not difficult, but for me, yes.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine. I'm gonna repeat it. So for loop here, the syntax for loop is just simply like that, for. And after that here, I will have my parentheses and I will have the body of the loop here. My code, it will go here inside the body of the loop. That's okay. So what are the different conditions I need, or the different part I need to pass for the for loop? First, I need to define the starting point. And the starting point here, I can just declare my variable and just say let I, it's equal to, I can start from 0. After that, the second part, I need to pass my condition. So what this condition here must be evaluated to false at some point in the future. Because if this condition I'm gonna write here, it was always true, I will end up with infinite loop. And that's not what I want to. For example, I want my code to run as long as I less than 20, for example. So if
Sam, sorry. I understand the example with that kind of data, but if it's other type like input or no with numbers, you know what I mean?
No, what do you mean?
Sam,
Like,
she's trying to say that she has issue only with the while loop, not the for loop. That's what she's trying to say.
Is that the case?
and yes and no, because I understand the logic with numbers, but I get confused when, as example, if you want to ask input from a user, that's when I get confused using for and while.
Yeah, but I told you the difference between the two. For loop, I mean, you know how many times you need to loop. When I'm asking the user for input, I'm not gonna use for loop because simply I don't know how many times the user it will click cancel or click OK without any input. So when I ask the user for input, I need to use while loop, not for loop.
Okay.
Is the idea clear?
Yes.
So for example, I can just say const user input, and here I can just say prompt, That's how we can ask the user, enter your name, for example. Your name, voila. Now, what I need to do here, I need somehow to, if the user did not enter anything, enter empty string, or did not just click cancel, I need to ask the user again and again and again until the user enters something. But here, maybe the user the first time just click cancel and after that write his name. Maybe the user click 20 times cancel and then write his name. So I don't know how many times I'm gonna loop. So when I don't know how many times I'm going to loop, it's a good idea to use while loop and not for loop. In this example, so I can just say while here, while no user input. That means if I don't have the user input, I'm gonna ask the user again and again and again and again until the user enters something. Okay, I can write it in another way. I can just, because my code is being duplicated 2 times, as you can see. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna get rid of this one here, and I'm just gonna declare my variable like that. Or and this response is not gonna work, so I need to use with let because I'm trying to change the value of the variable. Voila. So I'm just declaring a variable. I'm asking the user, if the user input here is, if there is no user input, then what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask the user again and again and again until the user enter anything. And at the end, I just can log the user input. So let's try to log the user input here. Voila. Hello, user input. Now, how that will work? Now, when I declare a variable in JavaScript without assigning it to any value, what will be the default value? Yes.
No.
I'm sorry?
No.
No,
Undefined.
Undefined.
it will be undefined. Undefined is truthy or falsy?
False.
Falsy.
Falsy. So if falsy here, not false, it will be true. And because this condition, it will be true, it will ask the user again and again and again until the user input here, we give it value. Same here, when the user click on cancel here, the value, it will be null. And null also is a falsy value. So false, not false, it will be true. So whenever here, this is while loop, I'm using it just to say, if the user did not enter anything or the user click cancel, ask the user again and again and again until the user enters something. When the user enters something, then I will just type hello user input, simply like that. Let's go to our code. And as you can see here, why it's number? Because it's starting. Let's try to enter this one, refresh. Please enter your name. Let's try to click OK. And if I type OK, notice it will ask me again. If I type cancel, it will ask me again. So let me enter something. Let's go just to our DevTools. Voila. Let me put a breakpoint here. Refresh again. Now what I'm going to do here, first, the default value here, as you can see, it's undefined. Why is undefined? Because I did not give it any value. So now what's happening here, undefined, it's a falsy value, not false is true. So it will go here and it will ask the user for something. So let's click here and let's try to enter OK without entering anything. If I click OK without entering anything, the value of the user input, it will be empty string. And as you know, empty string is falsy value. Not false, it's true. That means still this condition is true. And it will ask the user again, as you can see. If I hit cancel, the value of the user input, it will be null, and null also is falsy value. Not false, it's true. So it will ask the user again. And so on and so on. It doesn't matter how many times I click OK or cancel, the loop, it will ask me again and again and again. And I did use while loop because I don't know how many times the user click on cancel, for example. I don't know how many times the user click on OK, for example. So I'm not aware of how many times I need to run the loop. Now if I enter my name, notice, click. Now my name here, it's this string. And as we know, any string except the empty string is truthy value. That means this is true. Not true, it will be false. This condition is false. And now it will jump to the log and it will try to log my name, as you can see. Voila. Is the idea clear, Susanna?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. So the
Thank you.
idea, the idea of the loops, you need to know what you are dealing with. You need to ask yourself this question. Do I know how many time I need to loop? If yes, that's a good idea. That means you should go with the for loop. But if you do not know how many times you're gonna loop, it's a great idea to go with a while loop here. If you are dealing with array, it's a good idea to go with a for off loop. If you are dealing with object, it's a good idea to go with for in loop. If you want your code to run one time at least, it's a good idea to go with do while loop. Yes?
Yes.
Great. Let's explain functions here. Unless you have any other question, functions. So first, what are functions in JavaScript? So functions are simply some action. Functions are actions. There are some stuff we need to do here. There are just some actions. Now, when it comes to a language, let's compare it to English. The functions are just like verbs. For example, work. For example, walk, something like that. So the function is coming from the functionality. That means they are just simply some action. Okay. How can we first note here? The name of your function should always start with a verb, except one case. For example, I can just say hello. As you can see, I'm starting with a verb here. Why? Because they are an action. Except one case here, which is on click, when we are using it with on click, when we start with on. Because on click or on double click or something like that, this function, we are using them a lot actually in JavaScript. This is just special case when you start with on. Other than that, all the time your function need to start with verb. It doesn't have to, but I mean, that's the logic because function are action. Because they are action, it's a good idea to start with verb. Is it quite clear? Yes? No?
Yes.
So in JavaScript, we have three ways to create functions. The first way, which is what we call function declaration. Voila. Function declaration is super simple. All I have to do, I have to write the keyword function, and then I need to give my function a name. For example, let's say my function here, it will be say by, for example. Voila. That will be the name of my function. And as you can see, all the stuff here in JavaScript, they are camel casing. So the first word starts with lowercase, the second one starts with uppercase, and so on. And after that, of course, I will need parentheses here, and then I will need as the body of the function. And here in the body of the function, I'm just typing console.log by. So that's simply what we call function declaration. The function declaration, again, I need to write the keyword function. After that, I need to give my function a name. And of course, I need parentheses. That's the syntax. You cannot just ignore the syntax. It must be like that. Parentheses, and then I need the body of the function here, as you can see. Voila. Opening curly brace, closing curly brace, and my code goes here. Is function declaration is clear?
Sam, and the name of the function always need to be in camel case.
Yes, not just the function. Everything in JavaScript need to be camel casing except the name of the classes. We didn't study classes yet. The classes must be Pascal case. That means even the first, so Pascal case, it's similar actually to camel casing, but also the first character also it's uppercase like that. And we use it for name of classes. But in general, your variables, your functions, everything should be camel casing. I mean, that's the convention we use in JavaScript. Yes?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So that's the first way. The second way is what we call function expression. So function expression is also a function while I'm also using the keyword function. But what I'm going to do here, my function has no name. If I do that, and now let's console.log hi, for example. Of course, my text editor automatically detects that, okay, this function has no name, so how can you gonna call it? You cannot call a function, so that's what you call anonymous function. So anonymous function is a function without any name. Anonymous function, it's a function without name. or with no name, or without name, whatever you want to call it here. So a function here, anonymous function, it's a function, but it has no name. That's fine. Now, as you can see, I'm using the keyword function, but my function has no name. So I need somehow, I cannot call this function. In order to call this function, I can need to store it in a variable. And here, let's name it, for example, say hi. And when I save it in a variable, as you can see now, my function is also data type. As I told you, it's reference data type. I just store it in this variable. Now, as you can see, if I hover over my variable here is the function. Because it's a function, whenever I want to call it, I can just use this variable name and then parentheses, and my function will be executed. So that's what you call function expression. Now, function expression, we don't use it a lot, but you need to know that this exists. Is the idea clear? Is the difference between function declaration and function expression syntactically is clear or not? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, the last one here is arrow function, and arrow function also, as you can see, it is also an anonymous function. So I need parentheses, equal, angle bracket, and then here I can just console.log hello like that. Of course, this one also is an anonymous function because this function has no name. So I will have no option but store it in a variable. So I can just say const, say hello. And voila. That's what you call the arrow function. So arrow function because we have this arrow here. And now this arrow here, my text editor make it so it's equal and then it's angle bracket like that, but no space between the two. But my VS Code, when I try to make them one here, just change the sign like that to make it like an arrow. Well, that's simply the arrow function. Now, which one to use, which one not to use? Most probably this function expression, we don't use it a lot. As now the choice become between two of them, which is function declaration and arrow function. Now, starting with 2015, mostly we are using arrow function. I mean, React in all aspects in JavaScript, but sometimes using function declaration is also quite important. Why? Because now we will see what's the reason. Now, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to call my function here. I'm going to call all my three functions, all of them. I'm going to call this guy. Of course, to call the function, I need to type the name of the function, then parentheses. That's how we call a function. Should be simple. Let's go here. And now, of course, if I go to my code here, as you can see, it will write by. Why? Because it's just called my first function here by, and I'm logging by. Then it's calling the second function hi, and then y, that's why I have hi. Then this login, or I'm calling the third function, and then it's login hello. And that's the reason why I have these three results. That should be okay, it's not a problem. So what's the difference between these two? They are very similar. Not 100%, but they are similar. But what's the difference between function declaration and arrow function? Because that's the two type of function we use a lot. So what's the difference between these two? Can anyone tell me what's the difference between the two?
Difference is in hoisting.
Yes, very good. So what is hoisting?
We can use this function in any place of the document, like.
Okay, let me show you what do I mean. Now, what I'm going to do here, I'm gonna put a debugger statement here. And as you know, if I put a debugger statement, it will stop executing my code here. Now, notice something interesting here. Now, actually, I need to change it. Wait. Let me go in here. I'm gonna call my function before the declaration, which is I'm allowed to do with function declaration. With arrow function, I am not allowed. So again, hoisting means that even before I declare my function, I can call it. And that's hoisting happen only with the function declaration here. And also it happened with the name of the variable, but not their value. So it happened also with the name of the variable. So let's go here. Let's go back to our code here. Let's refresh. And let's try to go to my code one step by step here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say by. So what say by is going to do, let's just click it. But now it will go inside my function. As you can see, console.log, it will try to execute it. I will have no problems. And then it will go inside the arrow function and it would call it, as you can see as well. So what is going on here? Before I told you JavaScript, when JavaScript try to execute your code, there is two phases actually, not one phase. The first phase, it's happening very quickly. JavaScript, it will try to find all the name of the variable you are using, the name of the variable you are using in your file or in your code. So it will scan the name of the variable, and also it will look for function declaration. So when JavaScript find any function declaration or any name of variable, they will kind of move them to the top of the script. And that's what we call it hoisting. So that's the reason why I can call my function even before the declaration. Because what JavaScript is doing here as the first scan is go very quickly, try to find any function declaration or any variable names. It does not care about the variable value. It just care about the variable names. And then after that, it will find, if it find any variables, the name of the variable and the function declaration, they will be moved at the top of the script. Of course, not in my text editor. No, JavaScript do that in the engine. JavaScript is going to move it at the top. So it will be something like that. It's very similar, like JavaScript takes this function and put it at the top of the script here. Takes this variable name and put it at the top. And that's the reason why I will be able to call my function even before I declare my function. Is the idea clear?
Yes.
Yes. So that's the concept. We call it hoisting. Hoisting, again, yes. Question?
Yes, hosting. Do you mean if we call function before its declaration, so that is called hosting? Mean JavaScript engine knows about our function before
No.
that?
No, that's not hoisting. Hoisting means that JavaScript, that's my script. Normally, I told you JavaScript do two types of scans. The first time it go quickly, it will look for the function declaration and the name of the variable, if there is any variables. And if it find any variable name or any function declaration, JavaScript, it will internally, it will move these variable names and function declaration to the top of my script. So just like I move it to line 1. That's what we call hoisting. So hoisting, that means JavaScript moves the function declaration and the name of the variable. Both of them are hoisted. That means they are kind of moved to the top of my script. Because they are moved to the top of my script, that's the reason why I can now call my function even before I declare it. So calling the function, that's not hoisting. Calling the function before declaration, that's the result of hoisting. It's not a hosting. Hosting just mean, again, when JavaScript try to execute my code, it will go through the code, and if it find any function declaration or a variable name, it will just kind of move them to the top. Yes, no?
Yes.
Sajid?
Yes, but why they are not considering these variables where we give, for example, in arrow case or in other expression?
What do you mean?
I mean, just scan or put priority on the function declaration and not others. That is my question. I mean,
But I
function.
mean, because of
function-
hoisting. Because of hoisting. That's how JavaScript is being designed. The creator of JavaScript want to make this function declaration hoisted. Also, he want to the script to find all the name of the variables here in my script. That's the reason why. So it's one feature. That's the feature here in programming. We call it hoisting. Yes or no?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So what is hoisting again? Hoisting means the JavaScript will first time go very quickly through my file. And if it find any function declaration or any variable name, notice I am saying variable name. I'm not saying variable value. That's the reason why it give me say hello. See, it knows even when I am still here at line 7, I did not go to line 24, but my JavaScript engine knows that I have a variable called say hello. It knows that this variable exists, but it does not care about its value for now. When it reaches line 24, then it will care about its value. So the most important thing when hosting or when the first scan in JavaScript happen, it's just looking for the variable name only and function declaration. And if it find any, it will move it at the top of the script, simply like that. Clear?
But Sam, what about the other things in your program?
No, they are not hosted. The other thing in my program, they are not hosted. Only variable names and function declaration are hosted.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what else? Do you know now can distinguish between the three type of functions? Yes?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
This is the same idea, by the way. Function expression is the same idea because simply I'm saving it in a variable, and as you can see, the variable name only is being hosted. That means I cannot call this function before the declaration. I cannot call arrow function before declaration, but I can only do that with function expression, as you can see. Should be
Yes.
okay. Should be okay. So that's the concept, we call it hoisting. You will encounter hoisting a little bit more in the exercises. It's very important concept to understand. We know now we have three different ways to create function in JavaScript. Most of the time you will use arrow function. If the code is a little bit old, probably you'll find function declaration as well. But function expression is rarely we find it. You also know that the name of your function always should start with verb, except just one special case when we have on. On it has special meaning. I mean, on, click on, double click, stuff like that. It's okay, but other than that, my function should start with verb because they are actions. I think that should be okay. So let me create a function here. Function. I will use arrow function. So I can just say const. I can name it my, it's a bad idea to name it my function. So what we want to do, let's try to add some. That means a simple example here, sum. Now, when I say sum, I'm trying now to add, so my function, what I want to do in my function, I want to add two numbers, and then I want to return the result of the sum. So what do I mean by that here? I'm gonna just use arrow function, as you can see, and my arrow function, it will take two number, num1 and num2, which both of them should be a number. And after that, I wanted to return the result. Voila. So I wanted to return num1 plus num2. As you can see, first, this function is a little bit different. Can anyone tell me how is this function different from the previous function I created? How is this function is a little bit different from the other function I created?
Because you have given some parameters, num1 or num2. Before it was simple functions, but now it's a little bit more complex because there are some parameters in parentheses which you have given and someone returned you.
Yeah. It's, I don't know if it's more complex, but the idea is more useful actually. Now, there's no point if the function here is just executing the code again and again. It's maybe a little bit similar to loops. So why I don't use loops, why I have function? So let's say that's my code. I don't have this guy here. Let's say I have certain code here, any code here. I have some code, and now every time I call my function, it will just execute my code. So I can do it, I don't know how many times. I can do it some. So whenever I call my function, it will be executed one time, two times, three times, four times, and blah, blah, blah. And this function, let's say, is doing something very simple. It's just gonna log hello. Log sum, log hello, whatever you want. So as you can see now, my function is very simple. I can execute my function one time, two times, three times, four times, fifth time, or five times, six times, million times is not a problem. But here inside my function, I'm just console.login sum. So I can use loop, right? Can I use loop to do the same task?
Yes.
Again. here my function, when I call my function 6 times, it just log sum 6 times in my console. Can I use loops to log sum 6 times?
Yes.
Yes, so actually I can use loops. So why do we need functions? Well, we need function because functions are not like loops. Loops are, I need to execute the same code again and again and again. But when it comes to function, I can make my function more reusable. What do I mean by that? Well, that's what we call parameter. So when I can pass, for example, num1, num2, I can pass two number here to my function here. Depending on the function, I can have no parameter, or I can have 1 or 2 or 10 or 20. It's really depend on my need. And now here, if I want this function to give me back something, I need to use the return statement and return num1 plus num2. Voila. Again, what this function is doing here, now it's like I'm telling JavaScript, this is my function, but whenever I call this function, I'm gonna pass two numbers. And I want from you to add these two numbers and give me the result back, because I'm using the return statement. And then after the return, I have the sum, as you can see. So when I call this function, it will return me back, it will give me back the sum of these two numbers. Do you understand what I'm saying or not? Let's try to do it. Now let's call sum. And now here I need to pass two numbers. Why do I need to pass two numbers? Well, because I'm already saying here, as you can see, I have two parameters. I'm telling my function should expect two parameters, sum1 and num1 and num2. So it does make sense when I call my function to pass two numbers. So let me pass 1 and 5. Now also, if you notice in my function, I'm saying return me the sum. That means this function is gonna return something. It will be the sum. So I can store it in a variable. So I can just say const result, it's equal to sum. Now, if I log the result, what do you think it will be? If I log the result, what?
6.
6, of course.
6.
Yes, why? Because I am asking this function to return the sum. That's my function returning the sum. So this function, it will return me back, it will give me back the sum of both. So in functions, I am allowed to pass parameter. This parameter make my function reusable. Why? Because now here, when I create this function, now I can pass any two numbers. Any two numbers, I can pass them here, and it will add these two numbers and give me back the sum. So as you can see, my function now is reusable. Why? Because I'm using parameter, as you can see. So parameter is quite important to make my function reusable.
Hello, Sam. Can you make an example of loop with this function, please?
It doesn't make,
Yeah,
I
while
cannot,
loop? Huh?
I cannot make a loop working like this function.
Okay.
It's not possible because the loop repeats the same code exactly. The function here, it's not repeating the same code. Why? Because here one time I'm passing 1 and 5, and the second time I can pass 10 and 20. And the other time I can pass million and 5. It doesn't matter. Yes?
And so num1 and num2, the parameters, it should be declared somewhere, or we have to initialize, like not initialize mean the parameters should be the variables we have to be declared before, or like it give me error.
No. You cannot declare, you cannot or you should not declare any parameter. All you have to do, you just need to pass the parameter name. That's it. We don't declare parameter. We just pass the name of the parameter here. Voila. Yes, Sajid?
Oh, okay. Mean we do not need to declare them before, like the variables.
No.
Okay.
No. We do not need to declare them, because here these are similar to variable. Actually, they are placeholder, but anyway. So these two now, it will only be known inside my function. So I cannot now access num1 outside of my function. This num1, this num2, they are parameters. They only exist inside my function. They only exist inside this block. Yes.
By
Yes, no?
default, what the parameters mean taking the value? For example, we are giving const sum, but they are treating that parameters by default either string or something.
No, they are treating them as any. So if I hover over num1, it give me any. If I hover over num2, it's any. Does anyone know what any means?
No, we don't know what any means. Mean anything?
Yeah, it could be any data type. So it could be any data type, but what I can do, I can give it a default value. If I want num1, if the user did not pass any something, I can make it 1, for example, or make it 0. And here for num2 also, I can give it a default value. I can give it 0. That's mean now if the user just call my function, so if the user just come here and I say sum without passing any parameter, what will be the value of num1 and num2? So if the user just called my function without passing any parameter, what will be the value of num1 and num2?
0.
0.
Yes. So it will be 0 and 0. But when the user passing these numbers, this value is going to overwrite this value. So num1, it will be 1, and num2, it will be 5. That's what we call default parameter. So we can pass a default parameter to our function. And this default parameter, it will be 0 only when the user did not pass this value. So when the user did not pass num1 and num2, or the argument, when it's calling the function, so the value of num1, it will be 0, the value of num2, it will be 0 as well. Clear? Yes, no?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So, yeah, I have a question. So
Yes.
user prompt could be string or number, right?
User prompt? What do you mean user? You mean prompt?
If user take if you want the user put the number or strings.
No. I told you before, if you hover over prompt, it returns string or
Yeah.
null. So each function can return something. I did not create this function. I did not create the prompt function. It's already built in JavaScript. That means because it's built in JavaScript, I need to know how to use it. If I hover over my function, it's telling me the prompt is a method or a function. It's actually a method because it is inside an object, which is a window object. So what is telling me here, if I notice here, it's telling me the prompt will return is a string or null. And that will happen when the user click cancel, it will give me null. But if the user click OK or type anything, it will give me a string. Yes, no.
Yes.
Okay. Let me do this one here and let me try to create another function here. So that's my first function. Let's create a second function and I can just say const. Let's say multiplication, for example, multiply or whatever you want to multiply. So in multiplication, it's the same idea. I need to pass 2 parameters here, num1 and num2, and I am allowed to use num1 and num2 again. Can anyone tell me why? And here I can return the multiplication. Why I am allowed to use num1, num2 here, and also I am allowed to use num1, num2 here in this
Because
function.
then already exists in the first variable, no?
Okay. So why I am allowed in second function also to use num1 or num2?
So we have two different functions.
What's that supposed to mean?
So, okay, we have a function. The first function is different from the other one because they are not in the same block. They are different functions, two functions. So this
Because
one, the first one will give you the plus, and the second one will give you multiplication.
I think due to the scope of these num1 and num2, because there are different functions and store different values in different variables, so that's why const multiply is another and sum is another one.
but you don't think, because I just explained it like a few minutes ago. These parameter here, they are function scopes. They only known, they only live inside these parentheses. And that's the meaning here. So num1 here, this num1 only exists here in the body of the function. That means if I create a new function, I can have the same parameter if I want to. It's fine. Because this parameter here, its scope is only inside this parenthesis. Outside of this parenthesis, it does not exist. And that's the reason why I am allowed to use num1 and same variable name. It's okay. Clear?
Okay.
Okay, so what is the scope of the parameter? What is the scope here? What is the scope of this parameter? What is the scope of this parameter?
Related to that function in parentheses or in brackets.
It's
Block.
function. It's function scope.
Function scope.
So that means it only exists inside this function here. This is the body of the function. So they are function scope. Okay. So function scope, to answer your question, Anton, the function scope, that's mean if I have any variable or I have any parameter or whatever, that means it's only live inside this, from this parenthesis to this parenthesis. It only exists in the body of the function. Outside of the body of the function, it does not exist. That's what we call function scope. Again, a function scope means that if I have a parameter, and parameter, by the way, is our function scope, or if I came here and I declare a new variable, let's, for example, let's say const hello, it's equal to hello world, for example. Also, this variable hello, you can see it's a function scope. So here's block scope here. Voila. So this block here. So this variable, it will only be known inside this body here. Outside of this body, this variable does not exist. It's only exists. So I declare it inside the block here. That means it's only exists inside this block. I cannot access it outside of this block because simply const and let they are block scope. Yes?
Yes.
Good. What else? So we've seen this one here. Let me show you something nice about arrow functions. So what are arrow functions? Before I move to arrow function, again, I'm telling you your function. So let's write any function. I will name it my func, although it's bad naming, but it's okay. I'm just testing. My function here, as you can see, it's really depend on your need. What do you want? You could have 1 parameter, 2 parameters, 3 parameters, 10 parameters. It depends what do you need really. You can have. And also in your function, if you need to return something, you need to use the return statement. Voila. Return me this one. If you return nothing in the function like that, it will return. If I just type return here without returning anything, what my function will return?
Nothing.
No, it returns something.
String.
No.
Undefined?
Yes. It will return undefined. For example, if I just say console dot log, just say hello. So as you can see, this login hello, and after that, it gave me undefined. Where does this undefined come from? Well, it's coming from the function because this function return nothing. Console.log, this method return nothing. And because it returned nothing, but I have just returned nothing, it just give me undefined here. So it will return undefined. Again, depending on my need, I can use the return statement or I cannot use it. It's really depend what do I want. If I want to pass some data to my function, I can pass it as a parameter. If I want to do some calculations, then I want my function to give me back something, I can return whatever I want to. But you need to be very careful. After the return statement, I am not allowed to have any code. So as you can see here in my VS Code here, it's telling me unreachable code, which means after the return statement, I am not allowed to have any code. Before the return statement, I am allowed, it's okay. After the return statement, I am not allowed to have any code. Is the idea clear?
Yes.
Good. Daniel, do you remember yesterday? Daniel?
I do.
Yesterday when I used return with the example with Harley. So return here just mean sometime when I want to stop my function. So how can I stop my function from the execution? I can just say return, and I don't have to return anything. I just return here. I want to stop my function from the executing. So when my function is being executed and it encounter return, just like break, it will stop my loop. Return is gonna stop executing my function. So I can use return in two ways. Just return to stop executing my function, to go out of the function, or I can use it also to return some value depending on my need. Should be clear? Yes.
Yes. Is there any rule how many parameters we should use in function?
No, depend on your need. I can have one, I can have million. It's really depend on your need. But I mean, the good function is a function which does not depend a lot on the parameter. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Also, a function normally, a good function is a function doing one thing and one thing only. What do I mean by that? Well, let me create my simple function again, which will be add. I'll take two variable here. I don't want to show you this syntax now. So let me just return a plus b. So what is my function doing here? What is this function doing?
Adding.
So is this function adding two numbers, for example? So what is the job? What is the job of this function? It's just adding two numbers. So how many jobs this function is do? It do only one job, which is adding two numbers. And that should be how it is. It's not a good idea to create a function which do multiple jobs. For example, I created this function, then I want to add two numbers, then subtract two numbers, then multiply two numbers, and do all of them in one function. That's bad because it will not be reusable. Again, a good function is a function doing one job and one job only. Yes?
Yes.
So your function should do one job. I want to get the time and the date, for example. My function, it will give only the time and the date. My function adding two numbers. My function doing this one. So you need to focus on the, by the way, that's not always possible. We will see that on the handler because the handler do multiple stuff. So that there is some special case like in anything in life. But you should try as a programmer all the time when you write a function, you should focus on one goal and one goal only. Your function should do one thing. Because like that, you know what you are doing. If you come back to the function, you have a bug or you want to change the code, you are just focusing on one goal only. But if your function doing multiple tasks, and after that, you need to come and update one task, and you will break all the tasks like that. It will become very messy.
Sam?
Yes.
And there is rules for naming the functions, or how we shall name the functions.
It's just the same rule as naming variables. Because here my function here has no name. I'm just storing it in this variable. So it's the same rules as naming variables. But the difference is variable are names. Function, it's an action. That means it need to start with verb. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now I will show you some trick we can use with arrow function. Arrow function, specifically arrow function. So arrow function has some really cool, nice stuff we can do with them. For example, if I can write this function in one line, how can I do that? Well, I can name it here add one, and here I can add const, add two, and as you can see here, I can do it this way. So I can just omit the body of the function if I have just one line, and just here, even I don't have to use the return statement here. I can just say a plus b, and that's allowed in arrow function. Automatically, this function, if it's one line, it will return A plus B. Again, let me show you what do I mean. So I can just say const result 1, it's equal to add 1 plus this one, and I'm just gonna log the result just to show you that it is working as supposed to be. Now I can do the same for my second function, and I'm gonna log the result too. Both of them, they are working perfectly without any problem. If I go here, see, give me 3, give me 3. But this function here, it's 3 lines. This function here, it's only 1 line. So again, in arrow function, if I have 1 line only, so if this here is my body of the function, it's 1 line. If it's 1 line, I don't really need the parentheses here. I'm sorry, I don't need the curly brace here. And also, if it's 1 line, I don't need the return statement here. So what's happening here in the arrow function, it will automatically return A plus B for me. And that's what one of the future of arrow function. Again, we can only use it with arrow function. Is the idea clear?
Yes.
That's one feature. The second feature of arrow function is if I have one parameter and only one parameter. For example, let me comment this code, and here let's create a function. So I can just say const say hello, and my function take only one parameter, which will be the username. I can just type it this way. And I can omit also the parentheses here. But rule here, if I have only one parameter, if I don't have parameter, I need to have the parentheses. If I have more than one parameter, I need to have the parentheses. There is no option. I need to do that. But only if I have one parameter and one parameter only, I am allowed to use it without parentheses. It's okay, it's valid with arrow function. Of course, as you notice here, when I do that, my text editor automatically adds a parenthesis for me. This is not wrong. If I have one parameter, I can omit the parentheses. That's okay. But that's not a good practice. Why? Because if I have no parameter, I need to add the parentheses. And if I have more than one, I need to add it. So let's just agree on use it all the time. It will be just easier. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Because sometimes when we deal with array, you will see here without any parentheses like that, and you may tell yourself, okay, but that's not a function. Well, in reality, that's a function. Because one of the cool feature also in arrow function, if I have only one parameter, I can omit the parentheses. And here I'm omitting the body of this one, this curly brace, and also I'm omitting the return statement. And by the way, it will work the same, no change at all. If I say hello, word, and if I go here and try to execute it, what the hell happened? Yeah, when I save it, it's just my text editor is adding parentheses automatically for me. But am I not logging it here? Say hello, name, and here, yeah, because I'm just returning this one, I'm not logging it. So let's log it actually. So let's log it. It's the same idea, it's just I'm logging it, voila. And now if I go here, hello world, as you can see, that should be okay. Is the idea clear? So arrow function give me some new features, some new nice stuff. As I told you, if I have one line of code, I can just omit the curly brace and the return statement, and it will automatically return this one here for me if it's one line. And also, if I have one parameter and one parameter only, I can omit the parentheses here, but that's not a good practice. Don't do it anyway. But you need to understand it, because sometimes when we are using array method, we just don't add these parentheses, and you need to know that it is a function. Okay, what do we call name here? Let's go to the original guy here so you don't get confused. Voila. So what do we call name here? What is name?
Parameter.
Parameter. What do we call word? When we call the function, now this is what we call it parameter. When we are telling JavaScript, that's what you call function declaration. We are telling JavaScript, Okay, say hello, it's a function, and I will pass one value here, and this value could be any type, it's fine. And then I want you to just to log hello space name. That's okay, but this one here, we agree the name is parameter, but what do we call the word when we are calling our function and passing a value? What do we call it?
Argument.
Yes. So again, the argument and the parameter, they are actually the same meaning, but the parameter when we are declaring the function, but when we are calling the function and passing the value, we call it argument. Just two different naming, just like a method and function, simply like that. Is the idea clear? So we call the word here argument. It's just a name, and we call the name here parameter. Cool? Yeah, I feel like I'm explaining how to create a rocket.
Yes.
Is it quite clear function for everyone?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
it's okay.
Any question about this function? Of course, we will encounter function a lot. I mean, without function, we cannot do anything. We will use them all the time. So, yeah. Question? Question? Any
I have a
question?
question about return. When you make return, where the result is returned, because without the console log, we don't see it.
Yes. Now here, when I call my function, let's call this function 1 and 2. So this is the return statement. Now this function is gonna return the value, but I need to store it. So if I don't store it, I cannot see it, right? This function now, it will return me something. So I need to store it in some place. What are the boxes we use it to store value? And
It's a variable.
Variables.
Variable, so I can just say const result, it's equal to, and now here, this return value, it will be stored in this variable. Yes?
Yes, thank you.
So this function here, when I call it, it will give me value back. But over here, if I don't store it in a variable, I don't know, I cannot get this one. I can log it, but I don't want to log it. I want to save it. I want the return statement here. I want to save it because it's, I mean, I need it. If I don't need it, I will not return it. And when I call my function, it will return me the value. See, it's return me the value. This is the value. So I need to store it somewhere, and I'm storing it in this variable result. And now, this variable result, if I go to unlock this variable, I will see the value of this result is 3. Let me show you. Well, as you can see. And I can debug just to show you and make it a little bit easier. Debugger. So notice what will happen. Click, click. Now here I'm calling my function. Now when I call my function, notice, click. Now it will try to add 1 and 2. And 1 and 2 is 3. So when I click on this one, see, it tells me the returning value is 3. Now it will return me the value. And it returns the value here, and then I store it in this variable. And if I hover over this variable, it will just store this return inside this variable. And I'm just logging this variable. Cool?
Yes.
Good. Any other question? Question?
The return value should not be stored in the function declaration variable automatically.
What do you mean?
For example, we are returning something, function is returning any value, but it by default not showing in add, for example, this add where you are declaring const add, and it by default it does not go somewhere in the box of const add.
No, I did not understand your question, Sajid. Can you try to repeat, please? Just slowly so I can understand you.
Yes, I'm going to raise a question about, for example, under your debugger, there is a const add. It's mean this is a const, this is a variable already we are declaring. And whenever function, for example, arrow function of adding a plus b is returning something, it by default saves somewhere
Means the return
add.
statement. The add function or the return state is whatever I'm returning from the function.
Mean this variable is a function, or what is the status of this variable? For example, where a function variable mean, I'm a little bit confused about this variable. For example, you have already make a function, but if this function is returning something, but the value is not by default saving in add.
No. What saving is add, what is saved in add, it's the function itself. The return statement does not saved in add. What's saved in add is the function itself, my function. And when I call the function, then it will return whatever I'm returning. And after that, it's up to me to save it wherever I want to. But this add does not save the return here. It does not care about the return. It just saves my function itself. Yes, Sajid, or no?
Understand. Mean they are just as reference or stored somewhere the function itself, not its parameters are like this. Just
No. This function, and the function, as I told you, is the reference data type. It's just like array and objects that are stored in the memory. So the function signature. So this function here is just now stored in this variable, simply like that. And all I have to do, as you can see here, see, add, and that's my function A and B, as you can see. It's being stored here. The name of the function is being stored. How many argument or how many parameter do I need to pass to? So all the information about the function here is being stored here in this variable, which is add. And all I need to do is being stored in the memory. And when I call the function, then it will give me the return. Here, the add does not store the return. It just stores the function itself, as you can see. Yes?
yes, clear.
Any other question?
I have a question. I see that there are functions without parameters. What is the idea of it function, and can we use without parameters arrow function?
Yes, of course.
What is the idea of it function?
What do you mean the idea?
What for it used? Because functions should do something with parameters.
Yes. No. A function just do something. A function does not have to have a parameter. And also, it does not have to have a return statement. It depends on your need. What do you want? So depending on my need, I can create a function which take parameter. But if I don't need a parameter, I don't have to use them. For example, const get time, get date time. So I will create a function, date, time, date like that, time. And what my function is going to do here, it's an arrow function, as you can see. I take new parameter. And now what I need to do here, I'm just going to return the current time. So my function here, when I am trying to do the current time, I don't need any parameter. So I'm just passing it empty here, no parameter. And now here I can just say const now, it's equal to new date. I can just try to return this one. It will just give me a stringy date here, 2 ISO string here. So it will take the date here. Now it's an object. We talked about it before. It will now try just to give me the current date. So here I'm returning, as you can see, I am returning this value because I need it. But I don't have any parameter. And I don't need to actually, depending on my need. Now here, if I log my function, of course, I'm not going to see anything. So I will just have return statement. So it would be a good idea to see it so I can log it so I can see it. And voila. If I go to here, click, refresh, try to execute it, and voila, as you can see, it give me the date and the time here. So as you can see, this function take no parameter. Yeah, because I don't need any parameter. But another function, maybe I need parameter. Okay, I can use parameter. This one I'm using return statement. Another function, maybe I don't need a return statement. It depends on what do you want to achieve, Anton. It's not depending that if the function has no parameters, that means it's not a good or it's a bad function. No. It depends what do you want. Yes?
Oh, okay, thanks.
I have a question about the argument. Why the argument is, and what are the reason we are giving an argument?
What do you mean? What's the reason why we are giving argument?
Mean what is the use? For example, parameter. We give parameters for some function, for some action. For argument, what is the function of argument here? We don't know.
Sajid. Just think of it this way. When I create my function, so function has two steps normally. First, function definition. So function definition is I need to tell JavaScript that this is function. Here, I'm telling JavaScript, okay, I have a function. The name of the function is add. My function is gonna take two parameters, and my function is gonna return the sum of these two parameters. So that's the first step. I'm just telling JavaScript that this is a function. Now, when I wanna call this function, when I want to use this function, I have to pass argument. Why? Because I am telling, when I just created my function, I told JavaScript that I am gonna pass two numbers. That means when I call the function, I need to pass my two numbers, two arguments. Otherwise, it will just return me, it will not work depending on my function, of course. Otherwise, it will return me undefined because here I'm not passing anything, and it will return me undefined. So here, when I'm creating my function, I am telling JavaScript, okay, this is the name of my function. I will pass two parameters, and I want you to give me the sum of these two parameters. When I'm calling the function, when I'm using the function, I need to pass these two numbers. It's like a contract. I find a job, I told them I'm gonna work 8 hours a day. That was our argument here, or that was our agreement here. I told them I'm gonna work 8 hours. And here, when I go to work, I need to work 8 hours, simply like that. It doesn't make sense to work 3 hours because our contract is 8 hours. When I created this function, I told JavaScript that that's the name of my function. I'm gonna pass two parameters. So when I call the function, I need to pass these two. Does it make sense, Sajid, or not?
We can give any message. So mean practically when we are A and B, these are the parameters, but when we are calling function, we give some value or something in practical. So that to do something, to make some action in practical. Okay.
Any other question? Question? Any question?
No, it's okay.
Well, honestly, I tried my best to explain it, to make it simple. Sajid, here when I created, before I create a function, I need to make sure that I'm not creating useless function. Because if I'm not using this function, then why did I create it in the first place? So my function, what suppose this function doing? Well, it will be add. That means I want to add two numbers. So that's what I'm telling JavaScript. Okay, I'm gonna pass two numbers. I want you to add them and return me the sum. That means when I call the function, I'm gonna pass two numbers simply, this one and this one. And now I am expecting this function will return me 3. Why? Because according to my function here, it should take two parameters. It will add them and return me the sum. Yes?
Okay, clear.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's everything about functions. If I forget something, I might not really forget, but maybe next week I can repeat them again. With my study lenses, let me check.